To live without self-respect is to wander through life as a shadow of oneself. It is to hope that others will grant us the dignity we refuse to give to ourselves. Yet this hope is an illusion, for respect, like love, begins within. No one can give you what you will not first claim. The world mirrors back to us the relationship we hold with our own soul. If we treat ourselves with neglect, others will follow. If we diminish our own worth, others will believe us. But when we carry ourselves with the gravity of self-respect, we radiate a strength that cannot be ignored. Self-respect is not arrogance, nor is it inflated pride. It is the quiet recognition of one's own worth as a human being, the acceptance of one's limits and one's gifts alike. It is the refusal to betray oneself for the approval of others. Those who live without it spend their days in chains, chains forged not by enemies, but by the fear of disapproval, the hunger for validation, the desperate need to belong. The tragedy is that in trying to please everyone, they please no one, not even themselves. You must understand that respect is not demanded. It is commanded through presence. And presence arises from the way you treat yourself in solitude. If you cannot honor your own voice, you will forever echo the voices of others. If you cannot value your own time, you will always surrender it to those who waste it. If you cannot protect your boundaries, you will be consumed by those who see no boundaries at all. The psychological truth is this: until you embody self-respect, no external force can compensate for its absence. This is the path of individuation, the journey to become whole. Respecting yourself is not merely about standing tall. It is about integrating your shadow, embracing your flaws, and refusing to live in denial of who you are. It is only then, in authenticity, that others can truly meet you. Otherwise, they meet only a mask, and masks invite manipulation, not respect. The foundation of external respect lies in internal self-respect, for no one can offer you the recognition you deny yourself. Human beings are profoundly perceptive creatures. They sense whether you carry yourself with dignity or with doubt, whether you value your presence or diminish it. If within your own psyche you treat yourself as disposable, the world will follow suit. Life has a strange way of reflecting back to us the attitudes we nurture internally. Those who truly respect themselves move through the world not with loud declarations, but with a quiet certainty that radiates from every gesture, every choice, every silence they allow. They do not beg for attention, nor do they cling to the approval of others, for they have already given themselves the greatest approval a human being can possess, the acknowledgement of their own worth. When self-respect is absent, a person becomes vulnerable to every external influence. They bend under the weight of other people's opinions, shift their identity to fit the mold of expectation, and sacrifice their own needs for the fleeting comfort of belonging. Yet such belonging is hollow, for it is purchased at the cost of authenticity. To live without self-respect is to live in exile from yourself, constantly seeking in others what only you can provide. It is like pouring water into a vessel with no bottom. No matter how much validation you receive, it drains away because the fundamental recognition from within is missing. Self-respect does not come from achievement or social position. It emerges from the deep alignment between who you are and how you live. It is born when you refuse to lie to yourself, when you acknowledge both your strengths and your limitations without shame. In this honesty, there is power. A person who respects themselves does not need to inflate their image to command admiration, nor do they shrink in self-denial. They stand as they are, and in doing so, they invite others to meet them as equals. This is why the world instinctively respects those who respect themselves. They offer no mask, no pretense, but instead radiate the rare energy of authenticity. The psychological reality is that we teach others how to treat us. If you allow your boundaries to be crossed without protest, you instruct others to disregard them. If you constantly belittle your own achievements or dismiss your own needs, you communicate to the world that you are unworthy of recognition. But when you honor your inner voice, when you carry yourself with the discipline of self-care and the refusal to betray your values, you broadcast a message of undeniable strength. Respect, then, is not something you chase. It is something you attract by the very way you embody yourself. And until that respect is cultivated within, every attempt to demand it from others will crumble into frustration and disappointment. The beginning always is inward. Self-respect is not arrogance, but an authentic recognition of your own worth, a balance between humility and dignity that frees you from the extremes of self-neglect on one hand and inflated pride on the other. To respect yourself is not to proclaim superiority over others, for superiority is fragile and always in need of validation. Nor is it to sink into self-denial, constantly dismissing your needs and devaluing your existence. Rather, it is to look inward with clarity, to acknowledge that your life, with all its imperfections, is worthy of care and protection. Respecting yourself means you no longer treat your thoughts as insignificant, nor your feelings as obstacles, but as essential parts of who you are. Arrogance emerges when self-respect is absent, when individuals, unsure of their worth, attempt to prove it to others through domination, noise, or exaggeration. This is a mask, a defense against the quiet truth that they do not feel at ease with themselves. True self-respect does not need to shout, for it rests in stillness, secure in its own foundation. It is visible in subtle ways, in how you maintain your posture, in the tone of your voice, in the manner you listen, and in the ability to say no without guilt. When self-respect is genuine, it does not come at the expense of others. Rather, it allows you to meet them as equals, without needing to diminish or elevate anyone. There is also danger in confusing humility with self-erasure. Many people believe that to be humble means to devalue themselves, to always yield, to always place others first. Yet such false humility is merely another form of self-neglect, a refusal to accept one's rightful place as a full human being. Humility, when balanced with self-respect, is the recognition that you are neither everything nor nothing. You are a part of the whole, deserving of care, just as much as any other. Only when humility and dignity walk together does one achieve the posture of true inner strength. Respecting yourself is to carry the awareness that your time, your emotions, your body, and your mind are not to be squandered or mistreated. It is to act as a guardian of your own well-being, refusing to betray yourself in the pursuit of temporary approval. This self-recognition radiates outward, shaping how others perceive and respond to you. For people intuitively sense whether they are engaging with someone who honors themselves or with someone who has abandoned their own dignity. Authentic respect, then, is not built on vanity or the need to dominate. It is born from the calm certainty that you are enough as you are, and that you are worthy of being treated accordingly. Respecting yourself transforms the boundaries you set in life. Boundaries are not walls built to keep others out, nor are they weapons to control or punish. They are the natural extensions of self-awareness, lines drawn not in anger but in clarity, reflecting the value you place on your inner world. When you respect yourself, you begin to recognize where you end and others begin. You become aware of the subtle ways your energy is drained, your time stolen, and your identity blurred when you allow others to cross into your inner space without awareness or reciprocity. Without self-respect, boundaries either collapse entirely or become rigid defenses born from fear and resentment. A person who does not respect themselves will often confuse love with sacrifice, believing that to give endlessly, to tolerate endlessly, is proof of goodness. But this is not compassion, it is self-abandonment. When you begin to respect yourself, you no longer see the setting of boundaries as selfish, but as necessary acts of psychological hygiene. You realize that every time you say yes to something that violates your integrity, you are saying no to your own well-being. And every time you say no with intention, you are saying yes to a life rooted in self-trust. Boundaries shaped by self-respect are not rigid or cold. They are flexible yet firm, shaped by discernment rather than emotion. They emerge from the quiet realization that you have the right to exist without justification. You have the right to be treated with dignity, and the responsibility to uphold that standard in how you allow others to interact with you. This does not mean you cut people off at the first sign of discomfort, nor does it mean you let them walk all over you. It means you cultivate a space where both you and the other are free to be honest without exploitation. Boundaries built on self-respect are not reactive but proactive. They are not erected in panic after being hurt, but are maintained through a steady commitment to your own values. This makes your relationships cleaner, clearer, and more authentic. People begin to trust you more, not because you always please them, but because you are consistent, grounded, and real. The paradox is that when you stop trying to please everyone, you become more trustworthy and more genuinely loving. In the absence of self-respect, boundaries are often porous or absent altogether. You might allow emotional manipulation, tolerate toxic behavior, or silence your truth to maintain peace. But peace at the expense of your dignity is merely avoidance dressed as harmony. To respect yourself is to take responsibility for the space you occupy in the world, and to guard it with a kind but unwavering presence. You become the architect of your inner life, no longer outsourcing your worth to the whims of others, and no longer afraid to draw the lines that allow love, connection, and freedom to flourish without self-betrayal. Respecting yourself changes the way you endure solitude. Many fear being alone because, in the silence of solitude, the illusions they maintain about themselves begin to dissolve. Without distractions, they are forced to face the raw truth of their inner lives, their fears, their regrets, their hidden desires. For the one who lacks self-respect, solitude feels like a prison, an unbearable confrontation with the emptiness they have tried so hard to ignore. But when self-respect is cultivated, solitude transforms from an exile into a sanctuary. It becomes the ground upon which you meet yourself honestly, without judgment, and without the desperate need for constant validation from others. When you respect yourself, solitude no longer carries the weight of loneliness. Instead, it becomes an intimate dialogue with your soul, a place where you rediscover your capacity to exist without external applause. This is not withdrawal from life, but a return to yourself, a recognition that your value does not diminish when no one is watching. The ability to sit in silence, unafraid of your own company, is one of the deepest signs of inner strength. In solitude, you come to understand that self-respect is not dependent on constant interaction, but is rooted in the quiet assurance of your own being. Those who fear solitude often chase relationships, achievements, and distractions as a way to avoid meeting themselves. They become addicted to noise, mistaking busyness for worth and attention for love. Yet this only deepens their suffering, for no amount of external affirmation can fill the void created by the absence of self-respect. In contrast, the one who respects themselves does not seek solitude to escape others, but to nourish their spirit. They embrace it as a space of renewal where reflection and clarity arise naturally, unforced, and where life's complexities can be observed without panic. True solitude is not isolation. It is the freedom to be with oneself without fear. When you respect yourself, solitude ceases to feel like deprivation. It becomes a form of wealth, a treasure that offers rest from the demands of the world. In this sacred quiet, you recognize that you do not need to be endlessly productive, endlessly entertaining, or endlessly affirmed to justify your existence. You need only to be, and that being is enough. Respecting yourself allows you to enter solitude not as a punishment but as a return home. You do not use it to escape life, but to encounter it more deeply. And once you find strength in solitude, you are no longer enslaved by the fear of abandonment or rejection. You know that even when the world withdraws, you remain whole, intact, and worthy. Solitude becomes proof that your dignity rests not in the eyes of others, but in the unshakable core of your own self-respect. Respecting yourself transforms the way you allow love into your life. Without self-respect, love often turns into dependence, a desperate clinging to another as though they hold the key to your existence. Such love is not born of strength, but of fear. The fear of being unworthy on your own, the fear of abandonment, the fear that without another's presence you dissolve into nothingness. In this state, you do not truly love. You bargain, you compromise yourself, you silence your own needs, all in exchange for the fragile comfort of being wanted. But this kind of love corrodes the soul, for it is rooted not in authenticity but in self-abandonment. When you respect yourself, love ceases to be a transaction and becomes a meeting of equals. You no longer chase after affection like a beggar starving for crumbs, nor do you accept mistreatment under the guise of loyalty. Instead, you begin to recognize that your worth does not fluctuate according to how much or how little someone else gives you. Love becomes a gift freely shared, not a drug to soothe your emptiness. You can give deeply and receive fully, but you do so without losing yourself in the process. Self-respect teaches you that love is not about completion, but about reflection. A relationship becomes a mirror in which your own dignity is reflected back to you, not a crutch to hold you upright because you cannot stand alone. With respect for yourself, you no longer confuse passion with possession or sacrifice with devotion. You understand that true intimacy requires boundaries, and that love without self-respect is only attachment disguised as affection. Love born from self-respect is cleaner, lighter, and freer. It does not bind with chains but flows like water, nourishing both without consuming either. You are able to choose partners who honor your worth because you already honor it within yourself. You refuse relationships that demand you shrink, twist, or betray your essence in order to be tolerated. This does not mean you demand perfection from others, but that you no longer tolerate love that asks you to abandon who you are. When you respect yourself, loneliness no longer drives you into unworthy arms, and fear no longer convinces you to accept what diminishes you. You discover that it is better to walk alone in dignity than to be embraced in chains. And in that strength, the love you allow into your life becomes clearer, purer, and more enduring. Love is no longer a gamble where you risk your selfhood. It is an exchange of freedom, where two individuals meet not to escape themselves, but to share the richness of who they already are. Respect for yourself ensures that the love you receive does not enslave you, but instead deepens your capacity to live truthfully, passionately, and whole. Respecting yourself transforms the way you engage with failure. For the one who lacks self-respect, failure is experienced not as a passing event, but as a crushing judgment on their very being. They see mistakes as proof of inadequacy, setbacks as confirmation that they are unworthy, and rejection as evidence that they do not deserve a place in the world. This perception does not merely make failure painful, it makes it unbearable, leading to paralysis, avoidance, and a shrinking away from life itself. Without self-respect, failure feels like annihilation, because one's sense of worth has been tied entirely to external outcomes. But when you respect yourself, failure loses its sting. It becomes something natural, even necessary, in the process of becoming. You no longer identify entirely with success or collapse under the weight of defeat, because you understand that your value is not measured by any single triumph or mistake. Failure becomes a teacher, a mirror showing you where to grow, where to adapt, and where to strengthen your resolve. It ceases to be a verdict on your worth, and instead becomes a guide pointing toward your evolution. With self-respect, you can face failure directly without crumbling. You no longer need to hide behind excuses or pretend perfection. You accept that to attempt anything meaningful is to risk error, and to risk error is to risk humiliation. But this does not shake your sense of dignity. Respecting yourself allows you to withstand the temporary blows to pride without losing sight of the deeper truth, that you are capable of rising again, capable of learning, capable of enduring. Failure, in this light, is not a dead end but a forge. Each disappointment burns away illusions. Each mistake strips you of false certainty, and each rejection teaches you to rely less on external validation. What remains after passing through the fire is not fragility but resilience. Self-respect makes you unafraid of this process, because you see that even when the world denies you, even when the outcome collapses, your inner worth remains untouched. Those who respect themselves do not seek to avoid failure. They accept it as the necessary counterpart of all genuine effort. They know that a life without failure is a life without daring, without growth, without the joy of risking the unknown. And because they respect themselves, they can walk into challenges with courage, knowing that their dignity does not hang upon success, but upon their willingness to engage fully with life. In this way, self-respect does not make you immune to failure. It makes you sovereign over it. You no longer interpret loss as humiliation, but as initiation, each fall an opportunity to rise stronger, each defeat a step in the path toward becoming who you are meant to be. Respecting yourself determines the standards you set for how the world treats you. When you do not respect yourself, you unconsciously grant permission for others to disregard you, to exploit your silence, to test your boundaries until they dissolve. People sense, often without words, the level of dignity you hold within, and they respond accordingly. If you lack self-respect, you will find yourself surrounded by relationships, workplaces, and environments that mirror that lack, where your needs are dismissed, your presence undervalued, and your voice ignored. It is not because the world is merciless, but because you have failed to declare, through your own posture and actions, that you are worthy of more. Self-respect functions as a boundary that others cannot cross. It is the invisible framework within which you live, a silent declaration that says, "Here is who I am, and here is what I will not allow." When this framework is absent, others build their own structures around you, molding you according to their desires rather than your truth. But when self-respect is firm, it prevents intrusion, exploitation, and the slow erosion of your soul through compromise. This does not mean becoming rigid, arrogant, or unyielding. Rather, it means carrying yourself with a quiet assurance that commands recognition. You no longer beg for acceptance, nor do you tolerate environments that thrive on your compliance. You know that you have the right to walk away from what diminishes you, and the strength to remain true to your own principles, even when it costs you comfort or approval. With self-respect, you begin to select the spaces you inhabit and the people you allow near with discernment. You no longer confuse flattery with value or mistake attention for love. Instead, you gravitate toward those who honor your worth because you have already set the standard within yourself. Respecting yourself becomes the filter through which you separate what nourishes you from what depletes you, what affirms your humanity from what denies it. The paradox is that once you respect yourself, others respect you too, not because you demand it loudly, but because your presence itself communicates it. You move differently, you speak differently, you carry an air of dignity that does not bend under pressure. The world sees it, and even those who might wish to exploit you hesitate, for they sense the inner fortress that cannot be breached. Ultimately, self-respect is not just about how you treat yourself. It is the foundation upon which every relationship, every opportunity, and every interaction is built. Without it, you are at the mercy of others' whims. With it, you create a life where you are not a passive participant, but an active author, shaping your destiny according to your worth. To respect yourself is to set the law of your own existence, and once this law is in place, the world cannot help but acknowledge it.